He had been shot in the face, I believe, 9 times or 6 times or 7 times. There was a number involved. Hi kittens, and welcome back to Cat Talks. My name is Cat and I'm the one that talks here on my channel all about books and writing. Now, I thought I would do my wrap-up a little bit differently this month. I've been seeing a lot of recent read wrap-ups, and also Victoria over at What Victoria Read has been doing a kind of vlog style wrap-up, and I was inspired by all of those to do my own wrap-ups in a very different way. So you're going to see me in a lot of different outfits because I will actually be recording my segment for the wrap-up for each particular book a day or two after I finish reading it, so that the insights and the reviews that I give you are fresh off the cuff and I'm not reviewing a book, you know, after I've read 16 other books after it. Alright, let's jump right in. Don't forget to give your Warhammer a heft and swing it right into that like button, or else I'll find you. The first book that I read this month was Kings of the Wild by Nicholas Eames. This is a quite long and hefty fantasy. This book is about Clay. He is a retired mercenary who used to tour the wild with a band of miscreants, kind of like killing monsters, getting lots of gold for it. Think rock stars, but in fantasy killing land, or think your average D&D party. Then the frontman's daughter goes missing. It turns out she is in a hell of a lot of danger because she has started her own band of mercenaries and they need to travel a hell of a distance in order to save her. This book was fantastic. I gave it 4.5 to 5 stars. It made me smile and chuckle. It was full of a very kind of like genuine humour and a lot of real world nods, even though it is obviously set in a very fantasy driven land. There are some very dark parts of it, there are some very humorous parts of it. I just love every single one of the members of the band, and despite some reviews, I didn't find it to be misogynistic. Now, it is true that none of the main characters in the main party are female. However, a lot of the very different people that they meet along the way are female, are fighting, are leading bands, so I get it. I really enjoyed this. It was about the bonds of friendship and kind of like what you would do for the people that you love. And the second book that I read this month was Siege and Storm by Leigh Bardugo. I actually read this in a day. It was a day where I wasn't in the office and I just could not put it down. I don't know why people say it's bad. I should have trusted Becca over at Becca and the Books, who said that this was pretty great. I enjoyed it. I felt that the main characters were really growing as their time went on. I understood why she kept secrets from the love interest type dude. I loved the character of the Stormhund. And I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great. It did feel a lot like we would get somewhere and then immediately all the progress would be left and we would be back to square one. But that's kind of like a normal fantasy trope, and that happens, you know? That is a thing that happens in fantasy, and I loved it. I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was great. Having said that, I didn't feel like it added anything new to the genre of fantasy. Now, obviously, it has been out for a while, but even then, so I did only give it a 3 stars, even though I did enjoy it. It didn't suck me in. Not much happens. There's a lot of talking and not that much action. However, the book series in this book leans more towards a political intrigue book than it did in the first book, which was more of a standard adventure. And perhaps it's that twist that made me really enjoy it. I'm definitely interested in picking up the third book, Ruin and Rising, next month, and I think Zach over at Zach Tries to Read is as well, so hopefully we can read it together. And yeah, it's quite a thick book, but the type is also quite big, so this was a good one. So having achieved my E in Defence Against the Dark Arts, I wanted to pick up the first book in another subject just to broaden my horizons, so I picked up John Scalzi's Head On. This is actually the second book in a sci-fi series, which I did not realise when I picked it up, mainly because it is described as standalone. But it's set in the same universe and not necessarily with the same characters. I'm not sure because obviously I haven't read Locke in. Head On is set in a world where certain people have had a disease, which means that they are unable to use their bodies, like their bodies are unresponsive. However, to deal with this, the government has set up a special kind of internet that only this kind of person can access, and they have done this by putting a neural net inside people's heads with the disease, not everyone. Some people survive the disease and don't get locked into their bodies, and these can therefore, because they have this neural net, they can act as hosts for other people. So if you see a body, it is not necessarily the person that you expect inside that body, and a lot of these people have robots called Haydens, I believe, which they can, you know, remote control. Because of this, people have developed a sport where the goal is to rip the head off of an opponent and carry it through the goalposts, essentially. And during one of these incidents, The main character of this doesn't seem to have a gender, so I'm going to refer to them as they or them, but they are on site watching this game when the person dies, and they are thus investigating it, and it's all about whether it was an accident or whether it was on purpose. Having achieved my E in Ancient Runes, I then moved on to Defense Against the Dark Arts, and this is the book I chose for A, which is a book that is black under the dust jacket. I really enjoyed this book. It included a lot of different things because of the use of Haydens, so which are the robot bodies. So for example, there are people who share Haydens, like one specific Hayden that they own, and that feels to me a lot like dissociative identity disorder, but in a futuristic context. You also have people who are only able financially to rent out certain bodies for certain periods of time. Then you have people who want to try out different genders. They might have different gendered robots, and there are also non-gendered robots as well, which are obviously used for the non-binary people. There are all sorts of really good representation in this that I really enjoyed reading it, even though it was very lightly touched, which is, you know, the best kind of representation in my opinion, is like the kind which makes you think, but doesn't like is in a plot point in a bad way, if that makes sense. And just, yeah, I really enjoyed this. I would definitely read more from John Scalzi. And then I wanted something a bit lighter, so I picked up the Lumberjanes, which was my pick for bingo and isn't a pick for any of the Newts. I have to admit I didn't enjoy this. I think I gave it a 3 stars. It's probably more like a 2.5, but I gave it a 3. I enjoyed the art style, and I thought the concept was really good, but I really struggled with the story and telling apart the different characters, and I couldn't get on with it. I didn't know what was going on, and yeah. So this is a comic book about a group of young girls who are at a camp for young ladies, and they discover a magical artifact that sends monsters to attack them. They're trying to figure out why, and that's it really. Not much happens, and the plot that I've given you, nothing is explained of it until you're about 3/4 of the way through the book. So yeah, not my favourite cup of tea. I did like the motto, I did like the idea, I thought the execution was poor. So, having had a break from my Ancient Runes studies, I then went back and listened to My Sister's Keeper by Jodie Picoult. This is the story of a young girl. She's 14, and she has, throughout her entire life, been donating like organs to her sister because her sister has leukemia. And every time that this happens, obviously it's very painful and stressful, and she is now raising a lawsuit to prevent her from having to donate her kidney, essentially. So the plot is that she has contacted this lawyer and she wants medical emancipation. And she wants medical emancipation from her parents so that she can decide whether she's donating various organs, because nobody ever asks her. The book is told in a lot of different perspectives, everyone except the cancer patient's perspective, and then the lawyer's perspective is also told. And the court-appointed, like, I don't know what you'd call them, but there's someone who is appointed by the court to get to know the family and be the eyes and ears in the court for that week, say. Unfortunately, all of this is happening while the cancer patient is dying of a kidney failure because of the arsenic treatment that she has received. So yeah, it's all very time-driven, I guess. However, it's more of a portrait of this family than following the legal proceedings, and that I really enjoyed. I really enjoyed this book, but it wasn't like shocking, and it's I guess the twist, and it was average. I mean, it was beautifully written, and the plot was really interesting. I don't know what it is that doesn't give it, like, I would give this a 3.5 stars. Like, it just wasn't shocking, and it didn't make me feel, it made me feel sad at times, but it didn't make me, I don't know what it is. There was nothing in it that was new for me, I guess. I did enjoy it. I don't know what made it not a 5 stars. I don't know, but it was solidly a 3.5 or 4 stars. I really enjoyed the narration because they had different narrators for each character, so that was really good, and it helped me get a feel for who was who. So this is 5 books down, and we are on the 11th of August, so I really needed to speed up. So My Sister's Keeper was actually the last book I needed to complete my Ancient Runes, so to get an O in Ancient Runes for outstanding. So I decided to take a little bit of time off and do a little bit of reading for one of my extra exams, because I was feeling a little bit like I was never going to get through them. And I decided to pick up Care of Magical Creatures from the prompt for acceptable, which was to read a book that starts with A for Aragog, and for this one I chose A Streetcar Named Desire. Now this is a seminal piece of American literature, in particular obviously written for the theatre, so it's a play, and I listened to the dramatised version on audiobook. I really enjoyed this play. It was very emotional and it was very drawn, and you could tell that there was something not quite right, something bleeding a lot over the edges of this person's make-believe life, and it was phenomenal, honestly. Very sad, very sad play, but phenomenal. So I definitely recommend that. I did think that, obviously, that some of the choices that the characters made were very questionable. But we all make questionable choices in our lives, I suppose. And then I went back to History of Magic, and to get an acceptable in this one, I needed to read a fantasy, and so I picked up The Phantom Forest. Now, I picked this up as an ARC on NetGalley. I thought that it was reasonably well written. It could definitely have done with another round of edits or two. A lot of the sentences were quite clunky and the viewpoints swap around a lot, usually at scene breaks or section breaks in chapters, and that can leave you quite confused because they often swap worlds. There are two sort of there are two opposing worlds and they often swap in between them mid-chapter, and you often get a scene with one character's perspective and then you never come back to that character. So I did think that it could have done with a little bit more editing work, but I did enjoy it. I think I would give it a 3 stars. I thought it was a fairly average read. I didn't really believe in the fantasy. I did wrap up in a good way though, so it didn't do my cardinal sin of being the first book in a series and then not ending, which a lot of books do. So I would recommend it. I think that it has promise. And then I went straight back to Care of Magical Creatures. To get an E, which is exceeds expectations, I needed to read a book that was under 300 pages, and for this I chose Ian McEwan's On Chesil Beach. This is the story of a couple, newlywed couple on their honeymoon, and they're kind of like having a meal, and it goes through all of their relationship as they're having this meal, lots of misunderstandings, and this one again is quite sad. It has a very nostalgic feel to it, a very kind of like on the cusp of adulthood exploration, and it's written in a very literary way. I did enjoy it. I would give this a 4 star, definitely. It's very short. This is the large print edition, so if you can get a non-large print edition, I think it would be a lot shorter. And yeah, I thought this was very well written. I really enjoyed the characters. They were very different, and yet their love for each other was explained very well. And how they fell in love, and sort of like their parents' personalities was very well done, so I did enjoy that. And then I wrapped up by getting an O in Care of Magical Creatures by reading The Lighthouse by Paco Roca. This is a graphic novel following a young man who has been enlisted to fight the fascists in Spain during the Civil War, and the fascists are losing and they're being shot on sight. So he runs away, of course, as you do. He's still very loyal to the cause, but unfortunately he's injured and is confused and he has nowhere to go back to. So he ends up at this lighthouse, and the lighthouse owner is tending to him and looking after him and giving him hope again. It's a very short graphic novel. I can't really give you much more information without spoiling the plot, which obviously I don't want to do. But I definitely recommend picking this up. It was heartbreaking and beautiful, and the story was really well told through flashbacks as they, told each other stories of their lives, and it was just beautiful. To go for something different, I then went to read The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This is a thriller. It's about a young woman who was found next to her husband, who was tied to a chair. He had been shot in the face, I believe, 9 times or 6 times or 7 times. There was a number involved. The book is mostly told from the perspective of her therapist, who is trying to get her to talk again, but we do get little diary extracts from the murderer, or the murderess. This is kind of committing a booktube sin, but I did not like this book. I really enjoyed the writing style. I really enjoyed the way that the story unfolded. I thought it was beautifully told and a very fast read. I was very keen to know what was happening next, and yet it just was disappointing. The ending of a thriller takes a lot of work to pull off, and although I felt that the ending was in a way satisfactory, I also felt like I could never have guessed it. We weren't given any clues during the book to figure out the ending, and because of that it really affected my experience of the read, and I would give this book a 3 stars. And yeah, I'm gonna be crucified by my thriller friends. I'm sorry, but I just was so disappointed by the ending. So I finished The 7.5 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle, and this one is a thriller. I don't know if I've been doing book summaries. I might have to edit those in. If there are book summaries there and I haven't edited them in, gold star cat. But this is about a young man who wakes up with no memory of the past, and he's kind of a coward and he thinks he sees a woman murdered. He runs to get help and then everyone's like, no one was murdered, are you all right? So this book is about that. It is about a whole bunch of stuff. But essentially this guy wakes up in a different body every day and he only has the memories from the beginning of the week. And then at the end of the week, all his memories are reset and it starts over again. And he has to solve the murder of Evelyn, Hardcastle, which is a murder that looks like a suicide in order to escape this house where all of the guests are gathered. And I'm not sure how I feel about this book. I really enjoyed reading it. I thought it was really well written. I'm gonna have to reread it to give you my thoughts because it was such an intricately layered thriller that I'm not sure if anyone could possibly have guessed the ending. So I want to go back and look for clues now that I know what happened and what the ending is, because I really want to know the ending. But it was really good, so I would recommend it if you like being confused. It's a magical thriller essentially, so a fantasy thriller. So this one got me my E in History of Magic. So I'm done with History of Magic now. If I can like somehow by some miracle run out of reading material by the end of the month, which is in like 3 days and I still have to read this, then I will read Sabriel. But I don't think that's going to happen, so probably not going to be getting an O in History of Magic, but at least I did achieve an E, which was my goal. The Lives of Locke Lamora would get me an E in Defense Against the Dark Arts, and then I just need to finish off my bingo, so there's 2 more books I think in my bingo. There's We Are Mars, and then there's an undecided non-fiction, so it's looking dire, but... And the final book that I finished in the month of August was, in fact, The Lives of Locke Lamora by Scott Lynch. This book is older than 10 years, and I know that because this is the 10th anniversary edition of this book. So how I never heard of it, I don't know. But this was very fun. It was delightful. It had a very sophisticated plot. It was fun. It was unique, at least for its time. It is a heist novel. This is the story about Locke Lamora, a young gentleman who has been brought up by a con man to treat stealing and conning people out of money, particularly the rich, as an art form in order to dedicate, and as a religious duty, to the, I think 13th, or I can't remember how many there are, but to the hidden god, the god of thievery and trickery. And he is a very smart young man. He likes to deal with multiple dimensions, and he is currently trying to pull off the heist of a lifetime and steal a lot of money from a duke in a big heist that he's been planning for months, and lots of things are going to happen. I definitely recommend checking it out. It was absolutely fantastic. So that is it. So I passed my Newts, but I didn't actually finish all of the books I planned to read for bingo. So Emma, We Were Mars, and a unnamed non-fiction book, I believe, were the casualties. I am more than halfway through Emma. I did really enjoy it, but World of Warcraft Classic was released, and I definitely misestimated the amount of time I was going to spend playing World of Warcraft Classic to be maybe 4 hours, and definitely not over 20, but there you go. And yeah, I'm going to finish Emma. I have to read The Unhoneymooners first because that has to go back to the library tomorrow. But other than that, it has been fun. I hope that you guys had an amazing month. I certainly did, and I hope you guys enjoyed this format. Leave a comment down below if you enjoyed this format or if you didn't, so I know whether or not to do it this way next time. I don't know if it is a significantly longer video. It should be, because I remember things a lot more from the books as I'm reading them and as I'm giving you feedback. It should certainly be more honest. I gave Scott Lynch's Locke Lamora 4 stars, by the way. I thought that the characters were really well done. I really enjoyed the characters, and the kind of like the plot was very intricate. There were some parts of it where I was like, nah mate, but it was really fun. I really enjoyed it, and I hope that you will too. Alright, I'm going to sign off now. I've got to get started reading The Unhoneymooners, like I said. If you don't know what I'm going to be reading in September, there is a link here for my lovely video on Bingo Picks my September TBR. And if you want to subscribe, you can hit that button down below. I will see you guys next time.